Back to Vote and Voice. Today we're examining one of the most important structural principles in modern government, which is the separation of powers. At its core, separation of powers means that government authority is divided among distinct institutions. So instead of it being like an autocracy, one person rules everything and controls everything, now these responsibilities are distributed across separate branches and based off of design. Historically, concentrated power often led to abuse. We had monarchies with unchecked authority, revolutionary governments that had centralized control, and regimes without institutional limits frequently drifted toward repression. The core problem political thinkers faced was this: if government is necessary for order, how do you prevent government from becoming oppressive? The answer was not to eliminate power entirely, but it was to divide it. So we had the philosophical origins of this idea, most closely associated with Montesquieu and his work the spirit of the laws. And Montesquieu observed these political systems and argued that liberty depends on preventing any single branch of government from dominating the others. His work influenced constitutional design, especially in the United States and later democracies. This idea emerged from Enlightenment political thought, which emphasized reason, institutional design, and skepticism toward inherited authority. There was a deep concern about monarchy and centralized power. The belief was that if authority is fragmented, it will become harder for tyranny to emerge. Separation of powers is also connected to social contract theory, where the government derives legitimacy from the people. Then its powers must be structured in a way that protects those people. One famous idea that captures this logic is that ambition must counteract ambition, end quote. What this means is that institutions should be designed so that each branch has the motive and the ability to limit the others. Now let's examine the core branches. First we have the legislative branch, which are the people who make the laws, are responsible to draft, debate, pass legislations. They want to make laws based on a national budget, or meaning it determines how public money is allocated. In many systems, it has oversight authority over the executive branch, conducting hearings and investigations. As in some countries, it confirms executive appointments, which adds another layer of control. So, for example, the Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, and comprising the Senate and the House of Representatives for Congress. For example, this could be creating, amending, and repealing laws such as maintaining a federal budget or declaring war and regulating commerce. It acts as a primary check on the executive branch through oversight, power of the purse, and impeachment. The role in the separation of powers is that the legislative branch is designed as the primary policy-making body, which prevents the concentration of power in the executive branch. So yes, while the executive carries out the laws and the judiciary interprets them, the legislature ensures the government remains accountable, which usually maintains a system of checks and balances. So second is we have the executive branch, which enforces the laws. So it administers government programs, directs national policy implementation, and serves as the commander-in-chief of the military. It oversees administrative agencies that regulate everything from environmental standards to financial systems or safety, security, you name it. In many systems, the executive also holds emergency powers, allowing temporary expansion of authority during crises. So what the executive branch does is more based on day-to-day administration. So yes, public administration, national leadership. We have things like the key leaders and structure are like we have the president, which is the head of state and the head of government. They are the chief executive and the only individual in some strong presidential systems. They are the only individual in the government with a single person in charge of an entire branch. And we have the vice president, which supports the president and is first in line of succession. What happened to a president like William Henry Harrison, who at the time he died during his presidency, and there was a big constitutional crisis during that time because people at the time did not know what would happen if the leader died. People just went on with it when the vice president took power. Yes, it supports the succession during the term, and they also serve as the president of the Senate, where they can cast tie-breaking votes. And another part of the structure is the cabinet, which is the advisory body consisting of the vice president and the heads of 15 executive departments, such as the departments of defense, justice, and state. So now we have the bureaucracy, which is arguably another huge role of what we see based on news and the media. And that's the bureaucracy, which includes millions of employees across hundreds of federal agencies. For example, like the FBI, EPA, CIA, TSA, you name it. They have specialized tasks that are based on law enforcement, public health, and environmental protection, and a bunch of others. I could go on and on, but the point is they are people that specialize in these roles of helping in the executive branch. So what about the primary responsibilities and powers include enforcement of law, which is the president must take care that the laws be faithfully executed. This is done through federal agencies that monitor and punish violations of federal law. And second, we have Commander-in-Chief, as the president has supreme authority over the U.S. military forces. However, only the legislative branch has the formal power to declare war historically, and diplomacy. The executive branch leads foreign affairs, which includes negotiating treaties with other nations and appointing ambassadors. And they have executive orders, which the president can issue directives that have the force of law without needing immediate congressional approval to clarify or implement existing laws. And then you have pardon power, which is arguably the most debatable, such as the president having the authority to grant reprieves and pardons for federal crimes, except in cases of impeachment. So checks on other balances. So to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful, the executive branch has specific checks. We have the veto, which the president can refuse to sign a bill passed by Congress, preventing it from becoming law unless Congress rides the veto with a 2/3 majority. And you have appointments, which the president nominates the Supreme Court justices and other federal judges, which can influence the judicial branch's philosophy for decades. And you have the budgeting, which the president recommends a federal budget and suggests new legislation to Congress. So yes, it holds all these powers. And then next you have the judicial branch, which interprets the laws. You have courts determining how statutes apply in specific cases and whether government actions align with constitutional principles. It depends on which country, because some countries like the US or Canada, Australia, maybe the UK even have common law, and a lot of other countries they use civil law, which is based on statutes. But with common law, it's based on case law precedent. So in systems with judicial review, courts can invalidate laws of executive actions that violate constitutional limits. Judges may serve lifetime appointments, as in the United States, or fixed terms, depending on the country, as appointment structures influence judicial independence and accountability. Yes, it's more about reality for a judicial branch as they apply to real world situations. So we have the structure. And yes, I know we talk about American politics a lot, but it's the most obvious one to think about and the most simple to explain when you dive deeper. So we have, for example, in the USA, the branches organized into three main levels of courts. You have like the US district courts, the trial courts, where most federal cases begin, as there are 94 district courts across the country. Then you have the U.S. Courts of Appeals, intermediate courts that hear challenges to district court decisions, as there are 13 appellate circuits. Then you have the U.S. Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the nation. It typically only hears cases that have significant constitutional implications. So the primary responsibilities that the judicial system has is interpreting the law, which decides the meaning of federal laws and how they should be applied to specific disputes. Then you have the judicial review, which is the branch's most significant power, as it allows courts to review the actions of the other two branches and declare them unconstitutional if they violate the U.S. Constitution. And they also resolve disputes, which provides a peaceful mechanism to settle legal arguments between individual states or the government. They protect rights, ensuring that the government does not infringe upon the fundamental civil liberties guaranteed by the Constitution. So what we see now as of 2026 is that the Supreme Court continues to exercise its power of judicial review in major national disputes, such as the February 20th decision striking down certain tariffs. So the checks and balances are the judicial branch acts as a check on the other branches by declaring their laws and or executive orders invalid. Conversely, it is checked by them because the president nominates all federal judges, the Senate must confirm those nominations, Congress must impeach and remove judges for misconduct. What this means is that you have a system, you have these three branches, and some people argue there's a fourth branch. And some people say that journalism, and it's an unpopular view, but people say the fourth estate of government could be the news media. And what this means is that the idea is that for a democracy to function, the three official branches must be held accountable by an independent entity that informs the public. So we got the watchdog role, as the media acts as a check by investigating government actions, exposing corruption, and providing oversight that the other balances might miss or ignore. Then we have the agenda setting by choosing which stories to cover. The media influences what the public and politicians as well consider important. And then it shows a bridge to the people. It translates complex government decisions into information citizens that can use to make informed choices at the ballot box. So the historical roots behind the fourth estate or the fourth branch of government, is that the term originated in European politics to describe the press as a power alongside the traditional three estates: clergy, nobility, and commoners. And in the U.S. context, the phrase fourth branch gained popularity in the mid 20th century to emphasize that the press is a de facto political player with significant power to direct public policy. Other fourth branch candidates could be, as some political sciences use the term fourth branch to refer to other powerful entities, but such as the people, which some argue that through direct actions like referendums, petitions, and voting, the citizenry itself serves as the final branch. But it's not official, though. Unlike the three constitutional branches, the media is not the government entity and has no legal authority to pass laws, enforce them, or rule in court. Its power is entirely social and influential, which is protected by the First Amendment, which ensures the government cannot control what it reports. Okay, so yes, in presidential systems, the executive and legislature are elected separately and operate with clear institutional independence. And yes, constitutional courts also vary, as some countries have specialized constitutional courts, others integrate constitutional review into general Supreme Courts. But yes, do have modern challenges now, and one big challenge especially with the executive branch is that they often expand power during crises, whether due to war or fighting against terrorism, or expand their military or public health emergencies. These emergency powers may become normalized over time as these external factors play a big role in why it can feel dysfunctional at times. Us commoners view that. So partisan gridlock can paralyze legislatures, shifting practical power toward executives, as the judicial politicization can erode public trust in courts sometimes. The growth of the administrative state concentrates regulatory authority in agencies, which raises questions about delegation and oversight. There are a lot of common misunderstandings, as separation of powers does not necessarily mean that every person involved in politics has equal power among branches, as their authority status can differ. Separation of powers does not guarantee democracy, as authoritarian systems can maintain nominal branches without meaningful independence. And it depends heavily on political culture and norms. Written rules matter, but the informal respect for institutional boundaries matter just as much. So, what is the key takeaway from this? So, separation of powers is structural, not symbolic. It is designed to restrain power, but not to accelerate policy. Its strength depends on institutional integrity, legal clarity, and political actors who respect the limits of their authority. When you observe tensions between branches of government, that tension may not be failure. It may be system functioning as intended. And that distinction is central to understanding modern constitutional governments. I hope you learned something from this, because separation of powers is such a big, important topic in the modern era of politics. And without it, I think we'd be living in a worse time, like around the world. Because if one man or one single person ruled, that would mean the concentrated control. There would be no checks and balances if it's just someone with wealth and power. Yeah, it's gonna be devastating to a lot of people. But yeah, separation of powers is important. And I hope you learned something today, and I'll see you next time, and we'll talk more about political science. And stay tuned, and make sure to subscribe because I'll be posting every single week. So stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you.